today's growing global competition, business market poses the following questions. But MSBI is a one-stop solution to all these issues, which leads to job opportunities at an all-time high. And to grab that opportunity when it knocks on your doorstep, you need to be completely prepared. Hi all, this is Upasana from Edureka, and by the end of this hour, I'm sure you'll be able to crack any interview on MSBI because in this module, we are discussing MSBI interview questions. First up, let's discuss some questions generally on MSBI. So what is MSBI? Now, MSBI stands for Microsoft Business Intelligence. It's a powerful suite composed of tools which helps in providing best solutions for business intelligence and data mining queries. It basically helps you monitor, analyze, and plan your business using scorecards, dashboards, management, and reporting analytics. Next, what are the key features of MSBI? Now, you can divide the key features of MSBI into three parts: analytics, type of solution, and its UX. Now, is analytics basically, it helps you make sense of data. So basically, it is done using dashboards, guided navigation, and its drill down capabilities. Type of solution, it mainly provides end-to-end business solutions with an extended extract, transform, and load, which is the ETL capability. Next, its user friendliness. Basically, it is very easy to install, use, and maintain. So what are the tools used in MSBI and what do they do? Now, there are three tools used majorly in MSBI, which are also known as the SQL Server data tools. They are the SSIS, the SSRS, and the SSAS. Now, the SSIS, or the SQL Server Integration Services, is a component of Microsoft SQL Server database software that can be used to perform a broad range of data migration tasks. It's a platform for data integration and workflow applications, and it features a data warehousing tool which is used for ETL. Now, the SSAS is an online analytical processing and data mining tool in the Microsoft SQL Server. SSAS is basically used as a tool by organizations to analyze and make sense of information, possibly spread out across multiple databases or in disparate tables and files. Now, the SQL reporting service is a server-based report designer, builder, and deployment engine which is made by Microsoft. Now, this can be used to prepare and deliver various interactive and printed reports. It can help you create tabular, graphical, and freeform reports from relational and multidimensional database sources. So next, let's start off with the first tool in MSBI, the SQL Server Integration Services. So what is SSIS and how is it related to SQL Server? Now, SQL Server Integration Services, or the SSIS, is a component of SQL Server which can be used to perform a wide range of data migration and ETL operations. Now, SSIS is a component in MSBI process of the SQL Server. This is a platform where you do workflow applications basically. It is known for a fast and flexible OLTP and OLAP extensions used for data extraction, transformation, and loading, or ETL as it is most commonly known as. The tool may also be used to automate maintenance of SQL Server databases and multidimensional datasets. Next, what are the tools associated with SSIS? As you can see in the table in front of you, we use Business Intelligence Development Studio and the SQL Server Management Studio in the SSIS. The BIDS is used to develop SSIS projects, whereas the SQL Server Management Studio, or the SSMS, is used to manage the SSIS packages and projects. Next, let's talk a little bit about the procedure and execution of SSIS. So what is a control flow in SSIS? A control flow consists of one or more tasks and containers that execute when the package runs. So to control, order, or define the conditions for running the next task or container in a package, we use precedence constraints to connect tasks and containers in a package. A subset of these tasks and containers can also be grouped and run repeatedly as a unit within the package control flow. So the SQL Server Integration Services, or the SSIS, provides three different types of control flow elements. You have your containers that provide structures and packages. You have tasks that provide functionality, and the precedence constraints that connect the executables, containers, and tasks in an ordered control flow. The next logical question will obviously be, what is data flow in SSIS? Now, the data flow consists of sources and destinations that extract and load data, the transformations that modify and extend data, and the paths that link sources, transformations, and destination. As you can see, the data flow task is executable within the SSIS package that creates orders and runs the data flow. A separate instance of the data flow engine is opened for each data flow task in a package. Now, data sources, transformations, and data destinations are the three important categories in the data flow. Next, what are the typical errors in SSIS? So when a data flow component applies a transformation to a column data, extracts data from sources, or loads data into destinations, errors can basically occur. Now, errors frequently occur because of unexpected data values. There are three typical types of errors. First is data connection errors, which occur in case the connection manager cannot be initialized with the connection string. This applies to both data sources and data destinations along with the control flow that use the connection strings. Now next we have data transformation errors, which occur while data is being transformed over a data pipeline from source to destination. Finally, we have expression evaluation errors, which occur if expressions that are evaluated at runtime perform invalid. Next, what is environmental variable in SSIS? Now, an environmental variable configuration sets a package property equal to the value in an environmental variable. Now, environmental configurations are useful for configuring properties that are dependent on the computer that is executing the package. Okay, so what are the transformations available in SSIS? Now, there are a bunch of different transformations available in the SSIS, and we are going to discuss the functions of each of them. So we have aggregate. It applies aggregate functions to record sets to produce new output records from aggregated values. We have audit, which adds package and task level metadata, such as machine name, execution instance, package name, package ID, etc. Next, we have character map, which performs SQL Server column level string operations, such as changing data from lowercase to uppercase, etc. Next, we have conditional split, which separates available input into separate output pipelines based on Boolean expressions configured for each output. Next, we have copy column, which adds a copy of a column to the output. We can later transform the copy keeping Boolean expressions configured for each output. We have data conversion, which converts columns data types from one type to another. It majorly stands for explicit column conversion. Next, we have data mining query, which is used to perform data mining query against analysis services and manage predictions, graphs, and controls. Then we have derived column, which creates a new computed column from the given expressions. Next, we have export column, used to export an image specific column from the database to a flat file. Then we have fuzzy grouping, used for data cleansing by finding rows that are likely to be duplicates. Then we have fuzzy lookup, which is used for pattern matching and ranking based on fuzzy logic. Then we have import column, which reads image specific columns from database onto a flat file. Then we have a lookup, which performs the lookup or searching of a given reference object set against a data source. It is used for exact matches only. Then we have merge, which merges two sorted datasets into a single data flow. Then we have merge join, which merges two datasets into a single dataset using a join function. Then we have multicast, which sends a copy of supplied data source onto multiple destinations. We have row count, which stores the resulting row count from data flow or transformation into a variable. Then we have row sampling, which captures sample data by using a row count of the total rows in data flow specified by rows or percentage. Then we have union all, which merges multiple data sets into a single data set. Then we have the pivot and unpivot option, which is used for normalization or denormalization of data sources respectively, which basically reduces anomalies by converting rows into columns. Moving on. So how to log SSIS executions? Now, SSIS includes logging features that write log entries when runtime events occur and can also write custom messages. This is not enabled by default. Integration Services supports a diverse set of log providers and give you the ability to create custom log providers. The Integration Services or the SSIS can write log entries to text files, SQL Server profilers, SQL Server Windows event logs, or XML files. Now, logs are associated with packages and are configured at package level. Each task or container in a package can log information to any package log. The tasks and containers in a package can be enabled for logging even if the package itself isn't. So next, how do you deploy SSIS packages? Now, SSIS project build provides a deployment manifest file. We need to run the manifest file and decide whether to deploy this onto the file system or onto SQL Server. Now, the SQL Server deployment is much faster and more secure than the file system deployment. But alternatively, we can also import the package from SSMS from file system or SQL Server. Next, what are variables and what is a variable scope? Now, variables store values that an SSIS package and its containers, tasks, and event handlers can use at runtime. The scripts in the script task and the script component can also use variables. The precedence constraints that sequence tasks and containers into a workflow can use variables when their constraint definitions include expressions. Now, integration services support two types of variables. One is user-defined and one is system variable. Now, a variable is created within the scope of package or within the scope of a container, task, or event handler. Now, because the package container is at the top of the container hierarchy, variables with package scope function like global variables and can be used by all containers in the package. And this is called the variable scope. Now, this is a question which is very commonly asked. Can you name some of the perf1 counters in SSIS? I'm going to name all of them. Now, you have the SSIS service, the SSIS package instances, SQL Server SSIS pipeline, blob bytes read, blob bytes written, blob files in use, buffer memory, buffers in use, buffers pooled, flat buffer memory, flat buffers in use, private buffer memory, private buffers in use, rows read, and rows written. And with that, we come to the end of one segment, which is the SSIS. Moving on, we have a few questions on the SQL Server analysis services. So first question, what is analysis services? So the Microsoft SQL Server analysis services delivers online analytical processing or the OLAP and data mining functionality for business intelligence applications. Analysis services supports OLAP by letting us design, create, and manage multidimensional structures that contain data aggregated from other data sources such as relational databases and unified dimensional models. For data mining applications, analysis services lets us design, create, and visualize data mining models that are constructed from other data sources by using a wide variety of industry standard data mining algorithms. The next logical question will obviously be to list out its key features. So some of its key features are the ease of use with a lot of wizards and designers. We have flexible data model creation and management. We have scalable architecture to handle OLAP. It provides integration of administration tools, data sources, security, caching, and reporting, etc. It also provides extensive support for customer applications. Next, now let's talk a little bit about how SSAS functions. So basically, you create cubes or UDMs in an SSAS to store data. So this is also a very popular question. Is the cube the same as UDM? If yes, how? If no, how? So a traditional cube is based on a single fact with associated dimensia in a star or snowflake structure, whereas a UDM or a unified data model allows you to create a multidimensional structure over just about any underlying SQL data model through the use of reference dimensions and many-to-many dimensions. So the role of a UDM or a unified dimensional model is to provide a bridge between the user and the data sources. It is constructed over one or more physical data sources, and then end user issues queries against the UDM using one of the variety of client tools such as Microsoft Excel. So a lot of the times the cube and the UDM are used synonymously, but they are actually very different, as the UDM is kind of like a superset for a cube. So next, what is the need for SSAS component? Now, we need the SSAS component for a varied number of reasons. Firstly, analysis services is the only component in SQL Server using which we can perform analysis and forecast operations. The SSAS is easy to use and very interactive, which gives it an edge over other analysis tools. It has faster analysis and troubleshooting processes and the ability to create and manage data warehouses. It also applies very effective security principles. Next, this is a pretty common question as well. Can you explain the two-tier architecture of the SSAS? Now, SSAS uses both server and client components to supply OLAP and data mining functionality. So the server component is implemented as a Microsoft Windows service. Each instance of the analysis services implement as a separate instance of the Windows service. It has a formula engine cache and a storage engine cache. And a storage engine cache, the latter consists of a storage engine, which is then consisting of the dimensional data and the measure group or the facts. Just right above it, we have the query processor engine, which has the formula engine cache. Inside the analysis server engine, you can see the two-tier architecture. Clients communicate with analysis services using the standard XMLA or the XML for analysis protocol for issuing commands and receiving responses exposed as a web service. Next, this is a very important question. When is a database called an OLAP database? Now, the database is called an OLAP or the Online Analytical Processing Database when it follows the FASMI rules. This question can also be asked to you in the form of what is FASMI? In that case, the answer will be the same. A database is called an OLAP database if the database satisfies these rules. Now, what is FASMI? So it basically stands for Fast Analysis Shared Multidimensional Information. Now, fast analysis in an OLAP scenario is defined as either 5 seconds or less. It must support access to data by many users in factors of sensitivity and writebacks. The data inside OLAP database must be multidimensional in structure, and the OLAP database must support large volumes of information or data. With that, let's move on to what are the languages used in SSAS. Now, these are the 4 languages which are majorly used in SSAS: SQL, MDX, DMX, and ASSL. So you have the structured query language, which is the basic query language. You have multidimensional expressions or MDX, which is an industry standard query language oriented towards analysis. Then you have your DMX or data mining extensions, which is also an industry standard query language oriented towards data mining. Then you have your analysis services scripting language, which is a scripting language, as the name suggests, which is used to manage analysis services and database objects. Next, how are cubes implemented in SSAS? Now, cubes are these multidimensional models, as we had discussed earlier, that store data from one or more sources. They basically have 2 aspects, the dimension and you have the information. Cubes can also store aggregations and are created using cube wizards. We can also build dimensions when creating cubes. Now next, we are asked to differentiate between a derived measure and a calculated measure. Now the difference between a derived measure and calculated measure is when the calculation is actually performed. So a derived measure is calculated before aggregations are created and the values of the derived measure are stored in a cube. A calculated measure is calculated after the aggregations are created and the values of the calculated measure aren't stored in the cube. The primary criterion for choosing between a derived or a calculated measure is not exactly efficiency, but more like accuracy. So with that, let's talk a little bit about what is a partition. Now, a partition in analysis services is the physical location of a stored cube data. Every cube has at least one partition by default. Now, each time we create a measure group, another partition is created. Queries run faster against a partitioned cube because the analysis services only needs to read data from partitions that contain the answers to the queries. So queries run even faster when partitions also store aggregations, which are basically the pre-calculated totals for additive measures. Partitions are a powerful and flexible means of managing cubes, especially when you have really large cubes. Next, what is the use of a property called a non-empty behavior? So while creating a new calculated member in a cube, you have something called as the non-empty behavior. The non-empty behavior is an important property for ratio calculations. So if the denominator is empty, an MDX expression will return the error just as it would if the denominator were equal to 0. By selecting one or more measures for the non-empty behavior property, we are establishing a requirement that each selected measure first be evaluated before the calculation expression. So if each selected measure is empty, then the expression is also treated as empty and no error is returned. So next, what is a ragged hierarchy? So under normal circumstances, each level in a hierarchy in a SQL Server Analysis Services has the same number of members above it as any other members at the same level. In a ragged hierarchy, the logical parent member of at least one member is not the level immediately above the member. When this occurs, the hierarchy descends to different levels for different drill down paths, expanding through every level for every drill down path, which is then unnecessarily complicated. So what are the roles of an analysis services information worker? Now, the role of an analysis services information worker is the traditional domain expert role in business intelligence, someone who basically understands the data employed by a solution and is able to translate the data into business information. The role of an analysis services information worker often has one of the following job titles. You have your business analyst, who's also a report consumer. You have your managers, again, report consumers, technical trainer, help desk operation, or network administrator. So is everybody with me so far? Great. So what are the different ways of creating aggregations? We can create aggregations for faster MDX statements using Aggregation Wizard or through UBO, which is the usage-based optimizations. Note that you must always prefer UBO method if it's a real-time performance troubleshooting. Next, what is writeback? Now the enable or disable writeback dialog box enables or disables, as the name suggests, writeback for a measure group in a cube. Now enabling writeback on a measure group defines a writeback partition and creates a writeback table for that measure of the group. Disabling writeback on a measure group removes the writeback partition but does not delete the writeback on the table to avoid unanticipated data loss. And the next question is a little important. Name a few business analysis enhancements for SSAS. Now the enhancement types, applications, and data source, whether it's there or not there, is given in this table. You have enhancements like time intelligence, account intelligence, dimension intelligence, custom aggregation, and so on and so forth. Then you can see the type, if it's a cube or a dimension. You can see where it's applied to and whether it has a data source or not. Now we'll be moving on to a few questions which are more scenario based. These are going to be questions of personal preference, but the main agenda will be the same, which is to figure out how experienced you are and how skilled you are in the MSBI domain. First up, what MDX functions do you most commonly use? Now this is a great question because you only know this answer by experience. If you ask me this question, the answer practically rushes out of me. Cross-join, descendants, and non-empty, in addition to some count in aggregate. My personal favorite is cross-join because it allows me to identify non-continuous slices of the cube and aggregate even though those cube cells don't roll up to a natural ancestor. Then you can go on to add something like, indeed, cross-join has easily been my bread and butter all these years. Next, where do you put calculated members? Now the reflexive answer is in the measures dimension, but this is the obvious answer. So there's always a follow-up question like, if you want to create a calculated member that intersects all measures, where do you put it? Now a high percentage of candidates can't answer this question, and the answer is simple. It's in a dimension other than measures. Now if they can answer this, there can be this immediate cross question of why. The answer is because a member in a dimension cannot intersect its own relatives in that dimension. That is why you put it in a dimension other than the measures. Next, so how do I find the bottom 10 customers with lowest sales in 2003 that were not null? The answer is simply using bottom count will return customers with null sales. You will have to combine it with a non-empty or a filter as shown. Another common question like that is, how in MDX query can I get the top 3 sales years based on the order quantity? Now, by default, Analysis Services returns members in an order specified during attribute design. Attribute properties that define ordering are order by and order by attribute. So let's say we want to see order counts for each year. In AdventureWorks, MDX query would be as shown. With that, we've come to the end of another segment, which is the SSAS. And we are moving on to our final segment, which is SSRS, or the SQL Server Reporting Services. Obviously, the first question will be, what is SSRS? So the SQL Server Reporting Service is one of the server-based software systems that generate report developed by Microsoft. It is used for preparing and delivering interactive and a variety of printed reports. It is administered through an interface that is web-based. Now, reporting services utilizes a web service interface for supporting and developing of customized report applications. It can be competed with the Crystal reports and other business intelligence tools. This is obviously the logical next question. Can you explain its architecture? Now, reporting services architecture comprises of integrated components. It is multi-tiered, included with applications, servers, and data layers. Now, this architecture is scalable and modular. A single installation can be used across multiple computers. It includes the following components. You have your report builder, your report designer, report manager, report server. You have a report server database and a bunch of data sources. So your data sources that is supported by reporting services. Next, and this is a very common question, can you explain the reporting life cycle? Now, the reporting life cycle includes report designing, the designing which is done in Visual Studio Report Designer. It generates a class which embodies the report definition. Report processing, the processing includes bringing the report definition from the report data source. It performs all grouping, sorting, and filtering calculations. The expressions are evaluated except that the page header, footer, and the section items. Later, it fires the binding event and the bound event. As a result of the processing, it produces a report instance. The report instance may be persisted and stored, which can be rendered at any later point of time. Then there is report rendering or the rendering extension. When the report rendering starts by passing the report instance to a specific rendering extension, HTML or PDF formats, the instance of reports is paged if paging is supported by an output format. The expressions of items are evaluated in the page header and footer sections of the page. As a final step, the report is rendered to a specific output document. The next question is, how do you fine-tune report? So to tune up the reporting services, you can either expand the server or utilize the reporting services for another database server. For better embedding of the report contents, report applications, logic, and characteristics can have a duplicate copy of data. Replication of data continuously achieves a better embedding of report. Third is using no lock. The issues of locking can be well resolved and the performance of the query can be improved. This can be done using dirty read at the time of duplicating the data which is unavailable. So next, what is the difference between a logical page and a physical page in SSRS? Now, logical page breaks are page breaks that you insert before or after report items or groups. Page breaks help to determine how the content is fitted to a report page for optimal viewing when rendering or exporting the report. There are few rules which apply when rendering logical page breaks. So the logical page break are ignored for report items that are constantly hidden and for report items where the visibility is controlled by clicking another report item. Now, space is preserved between the report item with the logical page break and its peer report items. Now, logical page break that is inserted before a report item push the report item down to the next page. Report item is rendered at the top of the next page. The logical page breaks defined on items in table or matrices cells are not kept. This does not apply to items in lists. Next, what is null rendering extension? This can be also asked in the form of the use of null data-driven subscription. So when you create a data-driven subscription that uses the null delivery provider and you specify the null delivery provider as the method of delivery in the subscription, the report server targets the report server database as a delivery destination and uses a specialized rendering extension, which is called the null rendering extension. In contrast with other delivery extensions, the null delivery provider does not have delivery settings that you can configure through a subscription definition. Now, how does the report manager work in SSRS? Now, a report manager is a web application. In SSRS, it is accessed by a URL. The interface of this report manager depends on the permissions of the user. Now, this means to access any functionality or perform any task, the user must be assigned a role. A user with a role of full permissions can entire all the features and menus of the report. To configure the report manager, a URL needs to be defined. Next, what is the difference between SQL Server reporting services and Crystal reports? Now, Crystal reports are processed by IIS while the SSRS have a report server. The caching in Crystal reports is available through cache server. On the other hand, caching in SSRS is available for report history snapshots. Now, Crystal reports have standards and user-defined field labels, whereas the SSRS allows only user-defined field labels. Next, what is a report builder? A report builder is a business user ad hoc report design client that allows users to design reports based on the business terms, which is report builder model, they are familiar with, but without needing to understand the database schemas or how to write SQL or MDX queries. Report builder works with both SQL Server and analysis services data sources. So how does a report builder server analysis service cubes? So a report builder supports relational SQL and analysis services data. While models that provide access to SQL Server analysis services are automatically generated on the report server, the report builder model designer can be used to generate or modify the models that are built on top of the SQL Server relational databases. Now, these model building projects are a new type of project within a Visual Studio based development shell. Now, even here, we are going to move on to some scenario based questions which are going to be personal to only you. It is basically going to show how skilled and experienced you are in the SSRS domain. So let's start. Now, how do I get Report Builder to generate a parameter that can be set by users viewing the report? Now, in the filter dialog box, you can just click the name of the criteria that you would like to prompt the user for viewing the report. For example, for the criteria order year of 2000, you can just click on order year and select the prompt option from the drop-down list. Next, how can I add reporting services reports to my application? Now, Visual Studio or the SQL Server Data Tools, BI Data Tools, any standard or enterprise editions contains a set of freely redistributable report viewer controls that make it pretty easy to embed reporting services functionality into custom applications. Two versions of the report viewer exist, one for rich Windows client applications and one for ASP.NET applications. Next, can you import Microsoft Excel data to SSRS? Now, reporting services does not import data. It only queries data in whatever format it is stored in their native storage system. I will assume that you're asking whether you can create reports and use Excel spreadsheets as data sources, and the answer is yes. Reporting services supports a wide variety of data sources, including Excel files. You'll get the best performance with the built-in native .NET providers, but you should be able to connect to any ODBC or OLEDB data source, whether it comes from Microsoft or a third-party company. Next question, can we deploy SSRS reports on our personal website? So your reports can only be deployed on a reporting services site. Your only option for viewing them from other sites is an HTTP link. Some tools like SharePoint offer controls allowing you to view reports in the context of other websites, but the report is still deployed to and hosted from reporting services. So an interviewer can ask you, so we have an ASP.NET project that populates a data grid. Using data grid as my data source for reporting using SQL Server reporting services, is that possible? And the simple answer is no. However, nothing's ever simple. A set of reporting controls was added in the Visual Studio 2010, allowing you to report in a dataset. So on a dataset that is supplied to you, so if you retrieved your data into a dataset bound to the data grid of the dataset so that it had data to display, you could then use the dataset as the data source for the reporting controls. These are then client-side reports and not server reports though. Next, can you give a few drawbacks of reporting in SSRS? Now, for many years, Microsoft had no direct solution for reporting with the SQL Server besides Crystal reports. Now they have SSRS, but it does have several drawbacks. It is still complex to understand the complete functionality and structure of this new component, and many users are still relying on the reporting application they are more familiar with, which is the Crystal reports. Also, components in SSRS like Report Builder and Report Designer are meant for different users for different aspects of the report process. Yet complete understanding and exposure to both is important to utilize both functions fully and extensively. There are also issues when exporting very large reports to Microsoft Excel, as it can lead to a loss of data. Okay, with that, let's move on to our next question. So will running SSRS on Windows XP limit the number of users? The answer is yes, but it is not because of the SQL Server reporting service. The Internet Information Services, or the IIS component of Windows XP, only allows a small number of users to connect to the website at once. As SSRS run via IIS, this would prevent more than a few people from using SSRS at once. Also, the only edition of SSRS that will install on the Windows XP is the Developer Edition. This edition cannot be used for production purposes. You need Standard or Enterprise Edition for production use, which requires a server OS to install on. Examples of which are Windows 2003 Standard or 2008, any standard Windows version, etc. So next question. Are there issues when reporting SSRS reports into the Microsoft Excel? Now, when my users are trying to export an SSRS report into Microsoft Excel, one or two columns in the report appear to merge together. Why might this be? This can be your question. Now, exporting from SSRS is not always perfect. Even if you stay within the Microsoft range of products, if you have extra resources, you could splurge for an add-on that offers a much better control over exporting to Excel, such as Office Writer. From my experience though, it is usually headers or footers that cause exporting issues. If any of these headers or footers overlap with data columns in your report, you will find that the exported version of the report has merged cells. Also, you can check columns next to each other to make sure that there is no overlap as well. Next, you want to use a perspective in an MDX query. How do you select the perspective? So the answer is simple. You use the cube selector in the MDX query designer to select a perspective. Next, can you use data mining models in SSRS? Yes, you can use the DMX designer to create data mining queries for SSRS reports. However, do not forget to flatten the results set which is returned by the DMX query. Next, you want your report to display a hyperlink that will take users to your intranet. How do you configure such a hyperlink? So start with creating a text box item, set the action to go to URL, and then you can configure the URL however you want to. It's simple. So you want a report to display sales by category, subcategory, and product. You want users to see only summarized information initially, but to be able to display the details as necessary. So how would you create this report? So things like this might seem a little difficult to go about, but the answers are always usually pretty simple. So you can group the sales information by category, subcategory, and product, and then hide the subcategory group and set the visibility to toggle based on category item. It's that simple. Next, so you want to create an Excel interactive report from SSRS. In SSRS, can you create the same interactive experience in Excel that you would have on the web? The answer is no. You cannot create the same experience with SSRS. You can, however, use Excel to create such an experience. Next, when do you not use report caching? Is it better to use parameters to filter information in the query or to use filters in the dataset? Now, from a performance perspective, it is better to use parameters because they let SSRS pull filtered data from data source. In contrast, when you use filters, the queries retrieve all data and then filter the information, which is an additional step. Next, you want your users to select a parameter from a list of values in a list box. How should you configure the parameter? The answer is simple. You should create a data source that contains the possible values and then bind the data source to the parameter. It's as simple as that. Next, what is the main benefit of using embedded code in a report? The main benefit of using embedded code in a report is that the code you write at the report level can be reused in any expression in the report. So with that, I think we've concluded the final segment, which is the SSRS. That brings me to the end of this session. If you have any questions, any queries, feel free to put them in the comment section below. If you would want more content on BI or interview questions, do tell us and we shall be happy to oblige. Thank you and have a great day.
I hope you have enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries, and we will reply them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist and subscribe to Edureka channel to learn more. Happy learning!